Guys, let's talk keys to victory in this game. This is Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks, where you can download the app and use code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Kevin, from the Ravens' perspective, what are the three things that need to go right for the Ravens to come out on top on Sunday?
I think first of all, this team has to be able to establish their ground game early like they did against the Bills. Obviously, I'm not expecting an 87-yard touchdown again. I think that that Ravens fans were a little spoiled with that one. But I think that if they can get Derrick Henry going early, pick up some early first downs with that, and get Cincinnati to either bring more guys into the box or just be more wary of that, like we've talked about over the course of this show, that's going to be huge in terms of keeping that in the back of Cincinnati's defense's mind for the entirety of the game. And so this team, they've been working through a bunch of different offensive line combinations. They lost 3 starters, and obviously we've talked about Cincinnati on the defensive front. What is that going to look like on Sunday? If Baltimore can out-physical Cincinnati on the ground, especially pushing them off of their spots, getting to the second level, that run game is going to, because that starts everything for this Ravens team. So the run game is going to be the first thing that I'm looking for the Ravens in this one. Second of all, it is shutting down Ja'Marr Chase. Obviously, Marlon Humphrey did not play in both of the Cincinnati games last year, and Brandon Stevens did a pretty fine job on Ja'Marr in both of those games. And with Marlon back, Marlon's playing at a really high level right now, but they'd like to use him in the slot. What they've been doing is they've been putting Marlon in the slot, using Brandon Stevens and Nate Wiggins, their rookie, on the outside. Now, there's a possibility that Arthur Millette, their starting slot corner, is going to be able to come back this week. He returned to practice after spending the first 4 weeks on IR. So I'm very curious to see how the Ravens end up defending Cincinnati, but they have, as we talked about, a lot of other guys not named Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, if you want to throw him into the conversation, that they're going to have to worry about here. But Baltimore's defense has been very suffocating for the most part. It's been that pass defense that has been a little bit suspect over the course of the first 4 weeks. So maybe not last week against Buffalo, but the other 3. And then finally, I'm going to say control the clock and establish yourself so that you have a lead late in this game. Not that Baltimore can't play from behind, but at the end of the day, we know that this team, if they have, say, a 14-point lead, 17-point lead, the book is somewhat out on the Ravens. I think that's kind of the strategy for some teams is, hey, let's give them a big lead and see if they can hold on to it towards the end, because they have not been great about, blowing those leads. It's been difficult over the past 5 years or so for this team. But more often than not, you would at least hope, especially after what we saw in week 4 against Buffalo, that they can just ground and pound, keep your foot on the gas. That's something that the Ravens have been echoing really this entire past week. Didn't do it against Dallas, didn't do it against Las Vegas. They made sure to do it against Buffalo. So that's their new identity, is even if they're up by 17, they're not going to slow down. You have to keep that identity if you want to beat a team like Cincinnati, because they can put up points in a hurry. I know all the concerns kind of on what the defense is right now in Cincinnati. The offense, they're no slouches. We know what they can do.
Yeah, I think a lot of that makes sense. But what's interesting to me about the Ravens is the Bengals, and I'm at Paycor Stadium right now recording, like, you could say play with a lead, but if you're the Ravens, part of your explosion is running the ball. So I don't know if you're ever going to get the Ravens out of it. Like, Kevin, is there a scenario where they abandon that? They should never abandon the run. I know you mentioned play action, but I would always run Derrick Henry. Like, if you're down 10 in the fourth quarter, I'm still giving Derrick Henry touches, because that might be the 80-yard game that you want or you need.
It's so funny, because there's a very fine line between being too conservative and then not being conservative enough. And obviously when you're down, you just have to abandon all that. You're just like, all right, we have to get down the field. So if the Ravens are down, like you said, James, let's say 10 points and there are 9 minutes to go left in the game, you still give Derrick Henry touches, right? I think, maybe first down run, second down run. The thing that they can't do is you can't throw an incompletion on first down, be in 2nd and 10, then hand the ball off, and then get like 2 yards, you're in 3rd and long. Even 2nd and long situations kill you at that point. So you have to be able to run it effectively, but when you're down, you don't abandon Derrick Henry. The other thing that you can do is be a factor in the screen game. So I'm really curious. I mean, the Ravens have been terrible at screens. You can go back however many years you want to. It's been pretty bad. but they've actually been a very effective screen team this year, part of which is because Derrick Henry has come in here and done a really good job of that. So I'm not abandoning the run, but once you get down to that nitty-gritty fourth quarter, you're down by 2 scores. You have to do quick throws, make sure you pick up chunk yards, because teams are going to make you pay if you can't get chunk yards and that clock is still running.
Well, let's talk Bengals keys. I have nothing else to add there. I agree that Kevin's analysis is pretty spot on. And their keys go hand in hand, right, James? We're going to talk about the Bengals defensive line here. We're going to talk about controlling the game. We're going to talk about the Bengals defense in general, the offense's ability to keep up against a higher level of competition. Do you see it the same way, James? Are those the areas you're looking at, or where do you differ when you're thinking about the 3 top keys for the Bengals?
Score 35 or more.
Yeah,
that's it. Tell me if you do you have 35 or not?
Maybe 42.
They haven't done it this year. Yeah, right. And I was going to say 40. I feel like it's just almost unreasonable in this day and age to say that. So 35 is the mark. So key number 1, score 35. Key number 2, get off to a fast start. I do think that matters. I'll say why in a second. And it isn't because the Ravens are going to abandon their bread and butter. And then number 3, it's win the turnover battle handily. And I think all 3 go hand in hand. And here's why. If the Bengals get off to a hot start on offense and end up scoring 35 plus, Lamar and the Ravens, they might be able to keep up and stay with their ground game, but they're going to pass a little bit more. They're going to try this defense a little bit more. And the less you have to deal with Derrick Henry running between the tackles, the less you have to deal with Lamar Jackson in that ground game, I think the better. I think that this secondary, if there is an area where you would be like, okay, well, they have a shot here, it would be the secondary. It would being able to contain this passing game for the Ravens. And so maybe that does lead to turnovers. That does lead to the Ravens fumbling as they're driving downfield for the game tying score, and it forces them to press a little bit. I think it all goes hand in hand there. And to me, defensively, it's unrealistic, even though I spent a lot of time talking about the health of these guys, to expect BJ Hill, who's going to be back, Trey Hendricks, expect these guys to stop Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. So if you're playing from ahead and you're winning the turnover battle, you give Joe Burrow a few more touches, then could he put up 35 plus? I think it's realistic, and he has done it against the Ravens. He scored, led the Bengals to a 41-17 win over Lamar and the Ravens at M&T Bank in 2021. So they need something similar to that. That's the Jamar Chase spin move game.
Yeah, it's a tall task, let's say, for this Bengals defense right now. I think that it's kind of cliche to call it a key, but these big momentum swings, the turnovers, points off turnovers, if that kind of happens early in this game, teams steal possessions here or there, I think that's significant. Teams have been very willing to go for it against this Bengals defense early in the season too. I would expect the Ravens would be in the same situation if they get into 4th and shorts near midfield. And so if they can get a 4th down stop for once, count that as a turnover, those sorts of plays I think are pretty significant for the Bengals as well. But I think that the thing for me is keep the offense going, because I don't have that confidence in the defense right now, right? You got to find something to help with Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson needs to play at more of a level that he did in week 2 against the Chiefs, and we've seen from him the last couple of weeks, and coming off an injury. And he practiced, as you mentioned, James, on Wednesday, but that's a lot to ask of Trey right now. So it does feel like a challenging game for the Bengals, but it is at home, the first of these 2 matchups between these teams, and hopefully the home field advantage plays to the Bengals' favor if you're rooting for the Bengals in this one. Kevin, any closing thoughts from the Ravens' perspective?
I think that the big thing has really been the evolution of Zach Orr over these first 4 weeks, where I know we talked about it all over the past couple of years, guys, that Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense could not figure out Mike Macdonald. And that was something where it's like, can you finally get over that Mike Macdonald hump? Mike Macdonald's gone, and Zach Orr's a first-time play caller. And we have seen that he's not necessarily a super aggressive blitzer, at least not as much as Macdonald was, and nowhere near Don Martindale. That's a whole different stratosphere. But I think what we've seen is he's being able to adapt his personnel better. And over the course of these first 4 weeks, we've seen him come in with an identity, and these players are playing for him. And it's been a group effort there are a lot of questions about this group of, could they bounce back? They were a historic defense last year. I don't think anybody was expecting that again this season, but especially in the run game, they haven't fallen off there. In the passing game, they're improving. So it's just a matter of being able to, you're not going to stop, I'd say, the Cincinnati offense, but can you do enough to slow them down to where you can play your game? And I agree with you guys too. Fast start. I mean, for either of these teams, whichever team gets off to a fast start could be the team that establishes momentum. But regardless, these AFC North matchups, we know they can get kind of weird at times. So I'm not ruling out any tomfoolery in this one either.